Welcome to our YardSmart talk on plants for full sun. As you know, hopefully the YardSmart series is offered in partnership with the City of Calgary, and these resources are intended to help Calgarians establish and maintain yards and gardens that are well suited to Calgary's growing environment. YardSmart gardens are also pollinator friendly and can provide food and habitat for bees and butterflies. And I'd like to introduce Elaine. She's a master gardener, a garden designer, instructor, and writer. She gardens on 4 acres northwest of Calgary, growing vegetables, fruit, numerous perennials, shrubs, and trees. Elaine is very aware of the challenges we face in gardening in the Chinook zone, but paying attention to our site, choosing the right plants, and growing them in a sustainable way will ensure we can have gorgeous and productive gardens. There's so many opportunities to create great prairie gardens. We just need to believe that it's possible. And welcome to Elaine. And
Hi,
you're good to
everybody.
go.
Thanks very much. Sorry for our technical difficulties. So today we're going to talk about perennials for a sunny, dry garden. And there are a few things to consider when you're choosing perennials. All sun is not considered equal. So we talk about full sun. Full sun is between 6 to 8 hours, but morning sun is much softer and less intense than late day sun. So even though some plant perennials are full sun, they may not like it to be on a west side where they get that intense heat. So you have to be a little bit careful when you're choosing where your layouts are, and you want to choose really tough ones for there. When you're putting your perennials together for a sunny, dry garden, like all other gardens, you want to consider the layers. So you want an upper layer, a mid layer, and a ground layer. And nowadays, we're all about choosing perennials that attract insects. So think about the beneficial insects that these plants attract. Think about what they offer when they're out of flower. And then think about seasonality. So, we have our seasons are all over the place, relatively short. But you would like to choose plants, especially for a small space, that give you something throughout the season, be it nice foliage, interesting seed heads, pretty flowers, those types of things. Now, if you plant for water-wise gardens and using water-wise plants, these are plants that can withstand long periods of dry weather. So you really shouldn't have to fuss with these guys. This is once they're established, okay? Their first year, doesn't matter whether they're super drought tolerant, they do need water to get their roots out there. Once they're established, though, they should be able to survive on rainwater alone. Now, occasionally there are some that, for whatever reason, maybe where they're planted or whatever, if we have a long, intense spell, they might require a drink. But then that's just like a hand-watered drink, only one plant, not the whole garden. And once again, they're established, you really shouldn't have to do much in the garden. You don't really want to worry about deadheading and fussing with compost and things like that. It should be a self-contained system that kind of looks after itself. So when we're planting, just like any other garden, we want to plant in communities and we want to plant in layers. So we want a ground cover layer, we want mid layers, taller layers. It depends on the size of your garden. You might have to eliminate some of the really tall plants, but you should be able to have layers of plants. This provides depth and it also provides interest and it provides homes for a whole lot of beneficial creatures. You also want to mulch. And I know there's a lot of information out there now about not mulching, just plant the plants and let them do their thing. Well, I think a lot of that comes from a moister climate than ours does. So when you plant, you do need to use a mulch. And the idea over time is that when you plant the garden and you mulch it, the plants will creep out over time and they will kind of mulch themselves. So you'll start from a relatively stark landscape to one that looks like this, which is a living mulch, where the plants have kind of moved in and filled all the spaces on their own. So now you don't really have to do anything anymore. Organic mulches, this is what a lot of us start with, which is kind of a bark mulch or an arborist mulch that you get from, an arborist that's in the neighborhood. And this is a really good one to start with for a whole lot of plants. They kind of break down over time in the soil, keep the soil cool and moist. They allow the plants to spread, but they don't add so much organic matter very quickly that anything that likes it a little on the tougher side kind of gets over vigorous and floppy. And then we have stone mulches, and stone mulches are kind of all the rage right now. But you do have to be very careful with stone mulches because they heat up, they can get very hot, and they can cook a lot of plants. Where stone mulches work very well are for plants that really don't like moist environments, especially, kind of as we come out of winter and snow is melting and we're heavy clay soil, and they sit in cold, wet soil, and they really dislike that. So things like creeping thyme, sedums, hens and chicks, some of the cacti, they like a gravel mulch underneath where it keeps it nice and cool, but it keeps their crowns dry. So don't indiscriminately use gravel or rock mulches under everything because um, they have a purpose, they have a place, but not for everything. And, they can really do a lot of damage to some plants because they get so hot. So when you're looking for drought tolerant plants, there are a few things you want to look for. So think about what is the root structure like? And rhizomes tend to be a modified stem. And the typical one for us are the bearded iris. And you can see here, this long, fleshy stem that kind of just sits on the surface. They like the top to be exposed, but the bottom with the roots going down into the soil. And they store water. And so they can go for long periods of time without a drink. These rhizomes come in many different sizes and shapes, but they all kind of function the same way. We also have taproots. Now, taprooted plants don't like to be moved after they're established. They also can take a little while to get going because they put a lot of energy into the taproot. And a taproot can store up to 10% of annual rainfall. So it's a really tough one. And as an example, I've been out digging in the garden, and this is a root from a sea holly. I don't have it pictured here, but it's related to the globe thistle on the side. And this has been sitting in the sun for over a week. And you can see it is still lovely and fleshy, how long this thing is, and it stores a tremendous amount of water. So it has never been watered other than what Mother Nature gives it. So you can see how well adapted these are to a sunny, dry garden. And we have lots of plants that do have these tap roots. So you just have to be careful that when you're placing them, you know exactly where they're going because they really don't like to be moved afterwards. We also have shallow spreading roots, and we see this on a lot of our hot sunny ground covers, sedums, pussy toes, the creeping yarrows. And what they do is the roots are fibrous, they spread out sideways. And so when we do get rain, they can absorb it very quickly because they have a greater surface area. And so they can beat some of the bigger plants that also suck things up. We also have leaf adaptations that you can look for. So anything that has a nice silvery leaf or fine hairs on it, these act like a sunscreen. They also act to protect the tissues on the inner side of the leaf where the photosynthetic cells are. And so it just allows them to function without getting sunburned, exposure to lots of dry air. It also helps to keep away insects because they don't like those little soft hairs that we love to stroke. You can look for thick, succulent leaves. So like our hens and chicks and our sedums, they store a lot of moisture within those leaves. You also want to look for thin, narrow leaves. Now, a lot of our prairie native plants have these thin native leaves, and so there's less surface area there. So less surface area allows, or you get less evaporation or transpiration during the day. So they're able to hold on to more water. The extra good thing too is that they recover better after a hailstorm than some of the other guys do. So that's just kind of a quick overview of, what to look for when you're choosing a plant that likes a dry garden. There's lots of plants that love sun, but not necessarily all of them will do well in a drier garden space. So let's look at some fun ones. And there are so many here, it's impossible to cover them all today. So I encourage you to go and look some more and see what you can find because there really are, I mean, there's so many wonderful perennials out there that we can use in our gardens. So let's look at a few ground covers first. So right now, the perennial alyssum, this is Orinia saxatilis, and it will be burst in my garden anyway. I'm further north in Calgary, but it should be bursting into bloom any day now. There's two kinds. There's Montana, which has a silvery leaf, and Saxatilis, which has the green leaf. But they have beautiful yellow clusters of flowers, and they cover the ground, incredibly drought tolerant. You never have to water them. In fact, if you do water them or they're a wet space, they can rot very easily. Same with snow in summer. Now, snow in summer has a bad rap because whereas Arinia is not a thug, it will spread out. It has little thick branches that will send out that you can trim easily. But snow in summer will move out uh, via creeping stems. So it does have a bit of have a bad reputation, but it's a beautiful plant, super drought tolerant. And if you have a spot sort of at the end of a driveway or somewhere where it can't really interfere with a lot of other plants, it's fantastic because it really likes poor, gritty, crummy soil and will do very well. And if you compare it with other plants that have a similar competitive style, it works very well. It's only when you give it rich soil that you run into problems. We have a plethora of sedums out there. These are the ground cover sedums. Lots and lots to choose from, and there's all sorts of new varieties that are on the market that have really beautiful markings on their leaves. Excuse me. So this is my favorite. This is Sedum Angelina, and it's one of the few that are evergreen all winter long. So it really adds a bright pop to a winter landscape, especially when it's paired with this Veronica Whitleyi, because it also is evergreen over the winter. And we don't have a lot of evergreen plants here. The sedum takes on beautiful orange tones when the weather gets colder. Tricolor sedum has pink, cream, and green leaves. It's more of a mounder than a creeper out. Voodoo and Morale. Morale is the white. Voodoo is the dark leaf with the red flowers. Uh, Beautiful and super, super tough. This was at the end of our driveway along the road. And so it dealt with salt spray and anything else that could be thrown at it. But lots of different ones to try here. We don't think of being able to grow cacti here, but we do have some native ones here. So we have three different kinds of opuntia, which are the paddle cactus, viciously thorny, but incredibly beautiful flowers. Lots of cultivars of these out there now with the flowers, different colors and stuff. But again, another great place to put plants or put something where the soil is gritty and rocky and drains well. They do very, very well. We have a little moundy one called Escobaria vivipara, and it's a pretty little moundy thing. Both of these do very well with native fescues and some of our native grasses. Wonderful. Lots of hens and chicks out there, and these are a traditional succulent. Many, many different varieties out there now because of chick charms. They're breeding all these beautiful varieties. And the great thing about them is the colors intensify over the winter. They are hardy or sorry, evergreen here. And the colors just become more and more intense, quite beautiful over the winter months, especially if we have a dry one. Now, there's lots of different dianthus species out there. Some of them are tall, some are short, some are very short-lived, some are biennial. But these ground cover ones really are the best types. This is Bright Lights, Alpina. I can't think of all the different species names, but Firecracker. These they don't live particularly long, but they will seed themselves. And this is only about half an inch of composted bark that these are growing in. So they are really, really drought tolerant. They'll tolerate roads, like gritty soil of roads. The one thing they hate is wet soil. And they flower and flower and flower. They really are quite spectacular. Lots of Veronicas that are hardy here. There are some taller growing ones. The low growing ones are fantastic. As I said, these guys are actually, all three of these will overwinter as a green cover. So beautiful. So this is Creeping Veronica. This one's a little bit taller. And then we have the Whitleyi, which is my favorite. I do love this one. But beautiful plants. They bloom fairly early. Repens is white. The Pectinata, there's another one called Snow Cloud that has white with a blue center. but really beautiful. And they will creep out. They're not invasive. They just kind of creep out and cover an area. So they're really good along the edges of a driveway or someplace where this or sidewalk where the soil is really rocky and gritty. So let's look at a few larger ones for sun. And I mean, we have so many. Really, we do. We're very lucky as to how many of these plants love our climate. So here you can see this yarrow is terracotta. And this one that's just a sea holly. That's the one with this jumbo root. And then erigeron, which is a fleabane. Peonies. Peonies do so well on the prairies. And really, once they're established, you don't need to do anything with them. They're incredibly long-lived. They're a little bit slow to get established because they put lots of effort into the roots, but they will grow without any attention in some of the harshest environments and continue to just flower for decades, long after people have left. And so many different varieties to choose from. We're lucky to have Parkland peonies down in De Winton, and he carries over 600 varieties and is always bringing in more. So they're a little bit pricey to buy just because they take a while to get to bulk up, but they'll give you lots of long-lasting pleasure. Fall sunflowers. These are Heliopsis. Lots of different breeding going on here. Now the traditional one is yellow. This one here, which is summer sun. And it's funny because if you look, some of these are single flowers and then others are kind of double. And they just do that automatically, sometimes within the same plant. There is some breeding going on now to give you the dark foliage and then the different colors. So burning hearts and bleeding hearts. Now I have found these guys are not quite as drought tolerant as the straight species. This one in particular, I have to give a drink to a couple times over the summer months. But other than that, they're just easy care and beautiful to look at. Back to the erigerons. So there's many different kinds, and these, I don't know why these aren't as popular as they are. They're kind of fuzzy little asters, early asters, and they're beautiful. They bloom and bloom and bloom, especially earlier in the season. And then they have, if you want to deadhead them, they'll continue to bloom. But even the fuzzy little seed heads are pretty. They will seed themselves around a little bit, so some people might like that, some not. I quite enjoy it because then I can move them where I want them to. But very hardy, and the bees adore these. All the different pollinator insects love them. Now we have some native erigerons here, a little bit shorter, that really tolerate those dry, kind of crummy areas. So compositus has little white flowers, and then glabulus has the pink flowers. Not quite as fluffy as the others we showed, but also great kind of in the mid to lower areas of a border. Now, this is one people probably don't know much about, innulas. There's a couple different kinds. This one is gigantea, and it's huge. The plant itself, the main part of the body stays relatively low, but then it sends up these tall spikes of yellow daisies late in the season. And they're kind of prehistoric looking. Insects really enjoy them. They don't need any care from you other than to cut them down in the spring. And they will tolerate partial shade. They're not quite as floriferous in partial shade, but they do get those big giant leaves, which look really cool in a garden. Now, coreopsis, there are a lot of coreopsis out there. Not all of them are super drought tolerant or hardy. There's some in the verticillata has very narrow foliage, and there's a whole bunch of them that have been introduced that have other than yellow flowers. So there's pinks and some bicolors. They do well here, but you have to treat them as an annual. They don't overwinter well. Whereas these guys they just love it here. So we have golden showers and we have moonbeam. The two of these together are stunning because one's a soft, one's a deeper yellow, and the combination is really beautiful. These plants stand up very well to hail because they have very narrow foliage. And you can tell because of that narrow foliage, they don't really they don't need any water. These guys will suffer if you put them in a lush soil or one that doesn't drain very well. And you can see when you pair them with bigger leaves, that contrast is really beautiful. Now those ones are kind of medium height. There's some really tall ones that they're a little bit harder to find, but they're beautiful. This one's called gilded lace, and it's actually a cultivar or a selection of Tripteris, which is a native plant to the tall grass prairies. We're a short grass prairie, but they still do very well here. And you can see how tall that is. They get over, well, I'm almost 5.5 feet, 6 feet, somewhere in there. And they're taller than I am. And the same with this one. This is a selection that has it's a little bit more floriferous, but both beautiful. And Tripteris is really easy to start from seed. So if you're inclined that way, because they can be hard to find in the trade, you can start them from seed. Now, coneflowers. And coneflowers are always touted as super drought tolerant. There's been a tremendous amount of breeding going on, so there's every color under the sun. Uh, the fluffy centers, no cones, which is kind of crazy because the cones are the most prominent part. But there's lots out there. But any of these fancy varieties, even the purpurea varieties, they're not particularly drought tolerant. So sometimes you get them planted in the right spot, like where there's alongside a rock or edge of a sidewalk or something, where the soil stays cooler and moister deeper down, and they will do well there. But if you plant these in a really drought tolerant garden with poorish soil, excuse me, they will fail. They just don't like it. But they also don't really like a heavy soil. So they like to be a little more moist and they like to be well drained. However, Angustifolia, which is native to Saskatchewan, called the narrow-leaved coneflower, does very well here, and it is super drought tolerant. You don't need to water this one at all. Now, there is some work being done where when they're hybridizing, they're taking this variety and mixing them with the others. A lot of the ones that are coming out are being mixed with Halida, which is a more southern species, and it comes from a moister area. They get monsoon rains throughout the summer months. So just be aware that not all are created equal. Now, blanket flower. This is a native plant for our neighborhood. They love it. They mix very well with grasses and coreopsis, flax, you name it. They really are nice little pops. I did a webinar the other night where this gentleman, Matthias Nivak, he's a prof up at UC and has a landscape company. It's all native plants and he mixes these with in throughout, and it really is this beautiful pop of color. They bloom their heads off. They don't necessarily aren't particularly long-lived, but they will seed themselves. The death knell for this is rich, lush soil. All of these plants really like a leaner soil. If you give them lots of compost and a really beautiful loamy soil, they do tend to fade over time because they grow too enthusiastically, they'll get floppy, and they're more prone to diseases like powdery mildew. And there's all sorts of hybrids out there. They seem to come up with more and more all the time. Some of them are a little taller. These are really easy to start from seed. I like some of the older varieties that can be a little tough to find from seed because they're a little bit taller. A lot of these are bred to be really short, flower their heads off. I like the taller ones that kind of mix nicely with grasses, and they're a little not quite so in your face, but doesn't matter which ones you grow, they're all beautiful. Now, penstemons are a fantastic plant to grow on the prairies. We have many, many native penstemons here. All penstemons are from North America. They go all the way down into New Mexico, different species. Wyoming has, I think, over 60 different species. Colorado, not far behind. We have about 15 or 16. But these are fantastic plants for the garden. They love dry soil. They're particularly attractive to hummingbirds and all sorts of different pollinators. Bigger bees love them, bumblebees. They're great. I can't say enough about them. I have a lot of these in my garden. There's lots of hybrids out there, lots of fancy ones. Super easy to start from seed. Some are taller, some are a little bit shorter. These are some of the smaller ground cover ones. Hirsutus is native here. Pinifolius, which does very well here, excuse me, is native down into Colorado through there. Look at the soil. See how rocky and gritty this is? This is in my rock garden, and it just loves it. So all of these really like super well-drained soil. If they're sitting in wet, cold soil in the spring, that'll be a death knell. Or if they're planted in really rich soil. None of these guys like rich soil. These are some of the other ones. We have Prairie Dusk is a hybrid, as is Red Riding Hood. Prairie Dusk is pretty tall. It's over 3 feet. Some of the newer ones, Red Riding Hood, Proven Winners has got a whole bunch of them out. They like to be, they're a little shorter. They bloom. The plant itself is a low rosette, and then the flower spikes up, come up to about a foot or 18 inches, somewhere in there. But again, see the gravel mulch? They love that. Now, some of our native ones, Nitidus is a beautiful blue. It's up in the mountains. You'll see that a lot. Confertus will spread to make nice patches and mixes very well in grassland environments. It does well in rock gardens or step gardens, so very useful. But as I said, start exploring the world of penstemons because they really are fantastic. Campion is an old-fashioned one. We have Lychnis coronaria, which is either white or pink. They're biennial mostly, so they'll bloom one year and then they're gone, but they seed themselves. So you'll get a lovely silvery gray rosette, and then the next year it will send up these beautiful flowers for a large chunk of time, usually probably 4 weeks at least. And they kind of move around the garden, so they're fantastic that way. This is a more perennial one. This is one I started from seed. I got the seed from Kilterns out of Europe. It does very well, and it has these lovely clusters of kind of a salmony color. Easy to start from seed. There are a plethora of salvias that do very well here. Salvias are particularly drought tolerant, native to the North American continent. There's more and more being introduced all the time. Some of them are tall, some of them are short. They belong to the mint family, so are very easy to start from cuttings. A lot of these will self-seed, and so they're easy to start from seed. But these are ones that are available in the garden centers. But you can start looking around for other types of salvias. It's a giant family, and a lot of them are super easy to start from seed. And some of the bigger ones that we buy as annuals for our containers and stuff, they're easy to take cuttings from, and they're also easy to overwinter if you have a bright garage that doesn't freeze. Now these are the big cousins of our sedum. They're now called Hylotelephium. Many, many different varieties and cultivars out there, some with beautiful foliage. They're a late season perennial. They all have these kind of umbel-like flowers in pinks, dark reds. Some of them are, there's even some yellow ones and some white ones out now, but they're beautiful. They do very well here, and they provide that late season food for pollinators. One thing to be aware of, though, is pollinators, for whatever reason, do not like dark foliage. They will not be attracted to these flowers as much. And the dark anthocyanins, which cause this dark coloration in the leaves, is actually meant to, get rid of don't eat me. That's kind of the message here. So you'll find if you do a lot of dark-leafed plants that the pollinators don't really visit them. But punctuated throughout the garden here and there, they can be beautiful. So, beautiful, colorful foliage. The seed heads stand up beautifully over the winter. And then we have yarrows. There are so many different yarrows out there. Super easy to start from seed. Now, these guys will spread. I find some of the newer varieties kind of peter out over time. But if it likes your spot, be prepared to divide them about every 3 years because they do kind of die out in the middle. But there's a color for everybody. Now, there's many different kinds of yarrow to try. So, Filipendula has lovely soft gray leaves. Moonshine is a beautiful sterile cultivar, and you can see it mixed with a darker orange. I think this one is paprika. Beautiful, beautiful plants. And there's lots of them you can play around with. Baptisias, this is my favorite new genus. So many new introductions. They're a hardy native prairie plant, not necessarily here, but throughout the Greater Plains. They do very well, and they're a lupin relative, or yeah, they're related to lupins. They have nodular roots, so they draw in nitrogenous roots, many different colors. They bloom early. They have really cool seed heads as well. And there's lots of these coming out on the market. They make big, bulky plants over time. Once they're in the ground, make sure that's where you want them because they hate being moved. They have a deep, deep taproot. And then we have a variety of ornamental thistles. So this is our sea holly over here, globe thistle. These plants will be absolutely covered in bees later in the season. They absolutely adore them. This is a really old-fashioned Rudbeckia. It was given to me as the outhouse plant. I don't really know what species it is, but it is super, super tough and hardy, and it gets tall, and it mixes really nice with these. So if you know anybody who's got a farm garden, they probably have this, and you might be able to snag a piece and plant it with your thistles. Now we have a lot of grasses. We are a grassland, and so grasses do very well in our gardens, and they kind of fit to place. Now we are short grass prairie, not versus long grass prairie. So a lot of the ones that are out there actually are taller, so they wouldn't necessarily be native to our area, but they do well. So this is my Callum agrostis, and I love Carl Forster because it adds so much throughout the whole year. And you can see on top here, that's my Coreopsis tripteris, how tall it gets. So really big. Now, I know everyone says Carl Forster is overused, and yes, perhaps it is. But there's other varieties out there. They don't get quite as tall, but they have, stripes in them, more interesting foliage. They really are well adopted and a super grass, which is why everybody uses them. Little blue stem is native to the prairies. There's all sorts of different cultivars are out there. The plain straight species is green, but it does pick up those beautiful colors later in the season. The native one, if grown in really lean soil, I guess, stands up very nicely over the winter, and it has these kind of really cool seed heads here. But lots of different colors. The colors change as the weather cools down, so that's when you get the more vibrant oranges and reds. Now, other short grass prairies that do very well here and that are well behaved, not runners or spreaders. June grass over on this side is a lovely upright plumy grass, cool season grass that comes up early, and it mixes really well in amongst other perennials. Blue grama is my favorite. They call it the eyelash grass because the seeds only run down one side. There is a cultivar out there called Blonde Ambition, which I don't find very hardy, whereas this one is bone-clad hardy. And then we have a variety of fescues that we're a fescue native prairie, do very well here. Clump formers, great grasses. Now this is a cool season, a warm season, and a cool season again. And you just leave them up, cut them back in the spring. They all stand up very nicely over the winter, and they are all very easy to start from seed, and the seed is easily obtainable too from our either Wild About Flowers or ALCLA. And here's just a few more good garden native plants. Be aware, I know we're all on a craze to include more native plants into our gardens, but you do have to be aware that not all native plants are really good garden specimens. Just like anything else, you have to pick and choose who's going to do well because some of them, given a garden situation, will run amok and you have to be careful. So these ones fit well. They get along with everybody, they adjust well, and they're not overly aggressive. So we have our harebells, and the harebells are actually a keystone species in our neighborhood, which means they attract a larger than normal amount of insects to pollinate them or feed off them. They're wonderful. We have our own beautiful lupin species. There's two different kinds. This one's the silky lupin, and it's beautiful. It's not biennial; it's perennial, so it's much more graceful. It's mixed with some regular types, but you can see the difference in the flowers, and the pollinators adore them. We have a variety of prairie sages, which are basically artemisias. Now, some of them are runners. Frigida is a beautiful low one with very soft, delicate foliage. People often complain that this one splits open, and it's because you're growing it into richer soil. It does really need a lean, lean soil, but beautiful plants. Goldenrods. Now, goldenrod gets a bad rap because people think it causes hay fever, which it does not. It is very heavy pollen, so it is pollinated by insects, so it doesn't blow around in the air. But it is also a keystone species, and we have many different varieties that are hardy here. Many of them are clump formers. There are some that spread, so you want to make sure you get a clump former, but they're just covered in insects later in the season. Our Lady's bedstraw is a gallium, beautiful clusters of white flowers, and it will kind of spread politely. We have a variety of asters. Now, my asters come out in July, but some of the like not varieties, but some of the same species but different clones, I guess, will bloom later. So you can, if you can find one that blooms a little bit later and a little bit earlier, then you can extend the season for quite a long time. Now, there really are so many beautiful plants that I would love to have mentioned here, but we just didn't have enough time. So, we have blazing stars, we have all sorts of ornamental alliums. I highly recommend the California fuchsias. These are spectacular plants that thrive here. So you have to do a little bit of experimentation on your own, but thank you. I hope this was inspiring. Okay, I can see some of the questions here in the chat. So one says, what type of mulch, compost or wood mulch or montane? I use arborist mulch, but you can use any of those. They all work. The difference between a wood mulch, like a bark mulch that you can get, it doesn't break down very quickly, whereas arborist mulch or montane mulch, because arborist mulch is more, chips of the whole tree versus just bark, and montane mulch is finely shredded. They will break down a little more quickly, but any of those will work. You just want to avoid the big chunky cedar bits or even fence post peelings. I don't like those at all. But if that's what you got, use the peelings. Never use the cedar here. That's the problem. Do you cut coneflowers down in the spring? Yes. You can go out there and cut those down. The plants aren't particularly long-lived. They do tend to seed themselves around a little bit if they like where they are, but you can expect, about 4 years, and that's about it. Uh, Coreopsis tripteris. Okay. Yes, it self-seeds a tiny bit, not very much. Every once in a while, I'll find a seedling that's in the bark mulch pathway, and so I very carefully dig them up and move them to where I want to go. But I might find one seedling a year if I'm lucky. Where is a good place to shop for these particular plants? Well, there's ALCLA, which is out in Cremona. There's Wild About Wildflowers, or Wild About Flowers, that is down in Okotoks. Both of them have websites. If you're looking for, there's other one, I don't know where it is, but I just heard about it recently, called Grumpy's Native Plants, which I love the name. It's local somewhere. It's a new one to me. So those are good ones to try. And we are finding more and more native plants are kind of moving into the regular garden centers too. I found that from Ellen, I found that the only Heliopsis that could stand full all-day sun is summer sun. Others withered. Second, how much water for blue grass? Okay. Okay, I have not found that with the Heliopsis. You might have I mine are out in full sun all day and they seem to do very well, but they're not around concrete. So maybe if they're around a hardscape like a concrete or rocks or whatever, it's adding too much heat. And as I said, you have to kind of pick and choose. Remember, not all plants will thrive with sun from dawn till dusk, or even with plants, or even sort of late day sun. So if that's what you're finding, give them a position where they're not getting the hot sun, or move them a little bit away from any hard surface that might reflect heat. Oatgrass, once oatgrass is established in the garden, you don't need to water that at all. Let's see. Okay, Tanya, I have a slope in my garden that has lots of rock mixed in with the soil. The soil is very clay rich. I find it difficult to grow some flowers, lupins and echinacea. Things seem to dry up because of the slope, but maybe the clay soil retains too much moisture. Um, Probably more you have, it's hot. And if you've got clay and rock mixed in, that's actually really good drainage. So you might try some of the things more from steppe environments that some of the small native grasses. Actually, a lot of the native plants that grow in we're a steppe environment in that grassland would probably do very well there. You might even get away with a few rock garden plants as well. Placing some rocks around, bigger boulders, and then planting right alongside the rock. That area tends to be a little bit more moist. And so it'll get them through the hot summer months. If it gets really hard pan, rocky, or like concrete like clay, add a little more grit to it. So you can get like 10 mil grit from any of the suppliers and mix that in a little bit more to improve the drainage. And that should help. Lots of plants should be able to do well there. Is outhouse plant a Rudbeckia? Yes, it is. And I don't really, I know it's a Rudbeckia something, but it's perennial. So I can't really tell you the the species name, unfortunately. All right. I don't see any other questions. So thank you very much for attending. Hopefully you found this inspiring.